Just as poetry can be found in many formats, found poetry also comes in a variety of forms. In this lesson, we'll explore a few types of found poetry you can use with your students. Blackout poetry is one of the most commonly recognized forms of found poetry and one of my favorite to do as a first activity with my students. As a way of introducing found poetry, I typically make copies of a single page of a book we've previously read in my classroom. I remind my students about the text, recalling major themes, and encouraging them to share what stuck with them from the book, so that they have a foundation for their creative process. I give all of my students the same page and sets of markers, and encourage them to create a rough blackout found poem from the text. You can also do this exercise in small groups to foster further support and discussion. After students have had a chance to create their own blackout poems, we share them in small groups. I encourage students to discuss their challenges and successes, allowing them to practice found poetry in a low-stress environment and hear feedback from their peers. Once my students are familiar with found poetry as a method of reader response, I open up their options and encourage them to create their own collage-style or cutout found poems. These types of found poems can be physical collages made from cutout words or phrases, or they can be rewritten or typed by students. When writing blackout poetry, students are more limited in the order of their words, having to write in a linear fashion following the order of the words on the page. But collage-style found poetry opens up opportunities for students to reorder and adapt the words to fit their needs. A poetic form created by Terence Hayes, the Golden Shovel is a form of found poetry that takes a pre-existing poem and surrounds it with new words created by the reader. Particularly useful when paired with a poetry unit, Golden Shovel found poems allow readers to create an interpretation or response to an existing poem while injecting their own feelings and experiences into a new poem. In Terence Hayes' poem that inspired the form, titled The Golden Shovel, each line of the poem ends with words in order from Gwendolyn Brooks' poem, We Real Cool. Follow the link in the resources for this nano course to read The Golden Shovel. Another way to use found poetry is to play with book spines. Popular in libraries, book spine poetry asks readers to arrange book titles into a poem, creating a new meaning from a variety of texts. I particularly enjoy the poem on the right of this slide, which reads, What do you see in the country of men? Illegal people, equality on trial, civil disobedience, we are better than this, freedom. Like other types of found poetry, book spine poetry can be a low-pressure way to invite our students to write poetry, and the results can often be very powerful. Not only does found poetry come in many forms, but there are endless ways to write and find sources of text to create found poetry, making this method of reader response so adaptable for a variety of classrooms. In our next lesson, we'll look at tips for text selection that can help you refine how you might introduce found poetry into your classroom.